She built an empire. They called her unstoppable. But when death knocked on her door, not even the world's top doctors could save her. Until a quiet man, a single-dad veteran with nothing but a worn uniform, a soft heart, and a forgotten past, walked into her hospital room and gave her something no one else could. This is a story about second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of love that heals not just the body, but the soul. If this kind of story touches something in your heart, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every week we share powerful, uplifting tales that celebrate kindness, resilience, and the miracle of love, especially for those of us who still believe in it. Now, lean in close. The story begins. New York doesn't stop for anyone. Even on a Wednesday morning in early October, with golden leaves swirling between honking taxis and corner coffee carts, steaming beneath crisp air, the city's rhythm marched on. That is, until Aurora Westwood collapsed. It happened on the 72nd floor of the Westlight Tower during the most anticipated quarterly board meeting of the year. The conference room was bathed in glass and light with a skyline that whispered power. Billion-dollar slides flicked by on the screen. Investors leaned forward hungry. Aurora stood at the head of the table, radiant, razor-sharp, utterly untouchable in her cream silk blouse and tailored navy pantsuit. Her eyes, steel gray, held an empire behind them. Then she blinked, hesitated. Her fingers trembled over the laser pointer. She reached for her water, but her hand missed. "Ms. Westwood," one of the board members asked. Aurora opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, she dropped to the floor. The silence was louder than the thud. Phones fumbled. Shouts echoed. Her assistant screamed. CPR was attempted. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes, but by then she was already slipping away. By noon, her name was on every screen in Times Square. Westlight, CEO in coma, mysterious neurological collapse. Headlines screamed. Stocks wavered. The city held its breath. 2 floors below the ICU at St. Alden's Private Medical Center, Ethan Callahan mopped the hallway floor as he did every morning. He wore an old janitor apron over a faded navy blue military jacket, threadbare at the elbows, but clean. His long brown hair was tied loosely at the back, and his eyes, deep set and quietly haunted, never seemed to miss much. Down the hall, a nurse rushed past him. "Room 802, Ethan," asked, his voice low, steady. The nurse slowed just enough to nod. "The Westlight girl. It's bad." Ethan didn't respond. He just tightened his grip on the mop. That evening after the hospital quieted, when fluorescent lights turned soft and the world outside turned to velvet, Ethan walked past room 802. He didn't mean to stop, but he did. Through the glass, he saw her. Not the titan on Forbes covers. Not the woman who'd built a tech empire before 30. Just a young woman in a white hospital gown. Pale, motionless, fragile. A single monitor beeped softly beside her. Machines hummed. The city's golden girl now reduced to heartbeats and wires. Ethan stared at her longer than he should have. Something tugged at him. Not pity, not awe. Recognition. A memory flickered. 23 years ago. A cracked stoop in a neighborhood where dreams didn't live long. A 12-year-old boy with bruised knuckles and nowhere to go. And a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, with tangled dark hair and scraped knees, who handed him a dirty baseball and said, "You look like someone who needs to win at something." She'd drawn a smiley face on the ball in Sharpie. On the other side, she'd written, "To the bravest boy in the world, never forget who you are." Ethan stepped back from the glass, heart thudding. Could it be her? He whispered to himself. No way. But as he turned to leave, a nurse entered the room and gently adjusted the IV line. Aurora's fingers twitched. Ethan froze. It wasn't much, but to a man who'd watched life fade from soldiers on battlefield dirt. He knew a sign when he saw one. That night, after tucking his daughter Lily into bed, Ethan dug through the box in the back of his closet, the one with old medals, torn photographs, and his folded service flag. And at the very bottom, still scuffed and faded after all these years, was the baseball. The smiley face was nearly gone, but the words were still there. Never forget who you are. He held it to his chest and closed his eyes. Back at the hospital the next morning, headlines kept screaming. Neurologists from Zurich were flown in. Security guards blocked the hall. No one knew what was wrong. No treatment was working. But Ethan knew one thing. He knew she had once given him hope when he had nothing. Maybe it was time to give it back. Ethan Callahan had never believed in fate. Not in the foxholes of Afghanistan, where bullets didn't care who you prayed to. Not in the hospital corridors, where he now pushed mop buckets past millionaires dying alone. Not even when he lost Claire, the only woman who ever made the word home mean something. But standing at the edge of room 802, holding that old baseball in his calloused hands, he felt something shift. Not fate exactly. Something quieter. A pull. He shouldn't be here. Janitors didn't linger on the critical care floor. They cleaned, they left. They were background noise invisible unless a trash can overflowed or someone spilled coffee on their designer heels. And Ethan had no intention of breaking that rhythm. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want attention. But he also couldn't look away. Behind the glass, Aurora Westwood lay motionless. Her hair fanned across the pillow like spilled ink. Machines tracked her vitals with cold precision, as if they were trying to understand a soul using numbers. He didn't know who she had become. But he remembered the girl who handed him that baseball, the girl who once saw through a boy's bruises and gave him back his name. And that girl, somewhere in there, was dying. Downstairs in the modest break room tucked beside the laundry chute, Ethan sat alone on a cracked vinyl bench. He turned the baseball over in his hands. It still smelled like sun and grass and youth. "Dad," a small voice called. Ethan looked up. Lily, his daughter, 8 years old, full of questions and courage, stood at the door, holding her backpack and a half-eaten apple. "You're early," he said gently. She grinned. "Mrs. Torres canceled class. Power outage. I thought I'd hang here till your shift ends." Ethan nodded and patted the spot beside him. She climbed up, feet swinging. They sat in silence a moment, Lily eyeing the baseball. "Is that yours?" she asked. "It was," Ethan said. Then it wasn't. Then it was again. "That's confusing." He smiled faintly. "Yeah." Lily leaned closer. "Who gave it to you?" Ethan paused. "She was a kid I knew. Long time ago. She was good. The kind that sees you when no one else does." Lily tilted her head. "Is she still around?" His voice softened. "She's upstairs. Not doing too well." A beat passed. "Can we help her?" Lily asked as if the answer were obvious. Ethan hesitated. Then he surprised himself by saying, "Maybe." That evening, as twilight crept over the East River, Ethan and Lily made their way quietly back to the 8th floor. The security presence had loosened. The frenzy from the first day had ebbed into tense waiting. The media attention was now on international medical teams arriving. But inside room 802, no one had made progress. The diagnosis was still elusive. The prognosis grim. "Stay close," Ethan whispered. Lily nodded her hand in his. At the door, he paused, then slowly pushed it open. The room smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair. Aurora's chest rose and fell in shallow rhythms. Lily approached the bedside carefully, like a child who knew sacred ground when she saw it. "She's pretty," Lily whispered. Ethan set the baseball gently on the table beside Aurora's hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lily, with the guileless instinct of a child, reached out and placed the ball in Aurora's hand. And something shifted. Just barely. Aurora's fingers curled ever so slightly around the stitching. Ethan froze. Lily gasped. "Did you see that? I saw it," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. Aurora's heart monitor beeped a notch faster. A shiver moved through the lines on the screen. A nurse's voice echoed faintly in the hallway, but in this room, time seemed to stop. "Let's go," Ethan said, heart pounding. They slipped out silently, leaving the baseball in her hand. Later that night, Ethan sat on his porch, staring at the stars. The crisp October air bit through his jacket, but he didn't move. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from memory. Never forget who you are. He had forgotten. Somewhere between the battlefield and the funeral, between changing diapers and wiping strangers' blood off tile floors, he had let himself become invisible. But now something inside him stirred. Not hope, that was still too far, but a pulse. Inside room 802, a nurse named Nancy paused during her 11 p.m. check-in. She noticed Aurora's hand loosely wrapped around the old baseball. Odd. She reached to adjust it, but Aurora's grip tightened just slightly. Nancy blinked. She glanced at the monitors. Her eyes narrowed. And then, just for a second, barely more than a flicker, she thought she saw a tear trail down the corner of Aurora's cheek. She stepped back. Breath caught in her throat. "Doctor," she called out, voice shaking. "You need to see this." The next morning, room 802 had changed. Nothing dramatic. The machines still hummed. The nurses still whispered. But those who paid attention, who really watched, could feel it. Aurora Westwood's color was less pale. Her breathing had smoothed, and though her eyes remained closed, her fingers still gently cradled the worn baseball, like it was something precious. Not a prop, not a toy, but a memory too sacred to let go. Nancy stood near the foot of the bed, arms crossed, watching the monitors flicker with more energy than the day before. She'd been a nurse for 26 years. She'd seen people leave, come back, and some just drift away. This felt like drifting in reverse. Dr. Manning stepped in his coat, crisp, his eyes tired. Vitals. Nancy didn't answer right away. Instead, she nodded toward the baseball in Aurora's hand. She grabbed it, she said softly. All on her own. Dr. Manning raised an eyebrow. "That old thing." Nancy met his gaze. "I've been here a long time, doctor. You learn when something doesn't belong in the medical report, but matters anyway." Downstairs, Ethan was refilling the mop bucket when Nancy appeared behind him like a ghost. "You left something upstairs," she said quietly. Ethan looked up, startled. "What?" She tapped the side of her nose. "Don't play dumb. I know it was you. The baseball. Her hand, that tear." He hesitated. "You saw that." Nancy stepped closer. "I don't know what you did, but something changed. Don't stop." Ethan lowered his eyes. "I'm not a doctor." "No," she said. "You're a human being. And right now she doesn't need another diagnosis. She needs whatever the hell that was last night." Ethan stared at the mop water, then nodded. That evening, after Lily finished her homework on the break room floor and fell asleep, curled up in a faded armchair, Ethan sat with a small box in his lap. Inside were scraps of a life most had forgotten he'd lived. Folded letters, a drawing in crayon, a faded photo of Claire holding Lily by the lake, and beneath it all, a tiny item wrapped in tissue paper. He unwrapped it slowly, a child-sized harmonica silver, and scratched. He remembered the day. Summer. 1996, the sun setting behind the neighborhood playground. Aurora, the same little girl, had been sitting on a swing, legs too short to touch the ground. She played it badly. No melody. Just messy little puffs of sound. but she laughed with each one. Ethan had sat next to her, bruised and quiet, trying to disappear. She looked at him, held out the harmonica, and said, "It only works if you breathe like you mean it." Now, in the quiet glow of room 802, Ethan stood by her bedside once again. He didn't speak, just placed the harmonica gently beside the baseball. Aurora's fingers didn't move this time, but her heart monitor picked up a fraction, almost like it recognized something. Nancy, watching from the door, smiled. "You're bringing her back piece by piece, aren't you?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Yes, you do," she said. "You're reminding her who she used to be." Later that night, Ethan sat on the rooftop garden, the only quiet place in the hospital that didn't smell like bleach and grief. Lily sat beside him, sipping from a juice box. Did she like the music? Ethan nodded. I think she remembered the sound, even if she didn't know why. "Like when I hear Mommy's song," Lily whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah, just like that." Lily looked at him seriously. "Can I give her something too?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" Lily pulled a folded piece of paper from her hoodie. It was a hand-drawn card, colored with crayons, showing a big-hearted stick figure girl lying in a hospital bed, and beside her, a man, a little girl, and a baseball with a big, smiley face. Ethan smiled, eyes stinging. "It's perfect." The next day, the drawing sat propped up on Aurora's bedside table. It was silly, childlike, imperfect, but it filled the room with warmth the machines couldn't measure. And sometime near sunset, as the light hit the card just right, Aurora's eyes fluttered, only for a moment. But this time she wasn't just twitching. Her lips moved. Nancy leaned in. "Ms. Westwood, can you hear me?" A breath, so faint it could have been imagined. Then, ever so softly, Aurora whispered one word: "Remember." Downstairs, Ethan dropped his mop handle mid-sweep and looked up as if something invisible had touched his shoulder. He didn't know why, but he smiled. It was only one word, barely audible, a whisper lost in the hum of machines. But for those who heard it, "Remember," it was as if a crack of sunlight had split through a long, endless winter. Nancy wrote it in her nurse's log, underlined it twice, and told no one. Not yet. Not the press. Not the suits in suits, demanding updates every 4 hours. This wasn't for them. It was for the girl in the bed, and for the man in the shadows who had put the memory back into her hands. The next morning, Ethan arrived early. Not for work. Not officially. He had clocked out 2 hours before, but something wouldn't let him go home. Not yet. He stood just outside room 802, coffee in one hand, heart in the other. Nancy was already inside, checking Aurora's vitals. She spotted him through the glass and gave a barely perceptible nod. The harmonica and baseball were still there. So was Lily's drawing. Aurora hadn't stirred again, not in any obvious way, but her facial muscles had relaxed. Her skin had warmth. The machines agreed. And Nancy, seasoned as she was, didn't need charts to know something had turned. Ethan stepped in quietly. "Morning," Nancy said, not looking up. He nodded. "How's she doing?" Nancy hesitated. "Peaceful. Like someone who's resting, not drifting." He placed a hand gently on the back of the chair beside the bed. "I brought something," he said. Nancy arched an eyebrow. "Another relic from the attic of your soul," Ethan smirked. "Sort of." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn paperback book, Goodnight Moon. The edges were chewed, the pages soft from use. This was Lily's favorite, he said. Claire used to read it to her every night, before the chemo got too hard. Nancy's smile faltered. "You sure about this?" She might not remember the words Ethan said, but she might remember the rhythm, the voice, the lullaby of it. Nancy stepped back. I'll give you a minute. Alone with Aurora, Ethan pulled the chair close and sat down slowly. He opened the book. In the great green room there was a telephone and a red balloon. His voice was gentle low, the kind a man uses with someone he knows will never answer. But he read anyway. Every page, every line, until the last. Good night noises everywhere. He closed the book and looked up. Aurora hadn't moved, but a single tear rolled down the side of her face. Later that afternoon, Lily skipped down the hallway toward the break room, a new drawing clutched in her hand. She found Nancy in the hallway, outside room 802. Did she like the book? Lily asked eagerly. Nancy smiled. She listened to every word. Lily beamed. Then I want to give her this. She unfolded the new picture, this one drawn with more detail. A hospital room stick figures again, but this time, Aurora was sitting up smiling. A sun beamed through the window. The baseball had wings. Nancy chuckled. That's quite a prediction. It's a promise, Lily said proudly. That evening, the press caught wind of a change in Aurora's condition. Rumors spread. The hospital tightened access. The CEO's lawyer arrived along with the board's legal team. The hospital director called for controlled optimism. But none of them had seen what Ethan and Lily saw. Not just movement, not just vitals. Connection. That night in their modest apartment above the laundromat, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed. Tell me again how Mommy used to read, Lily said sleepily. Ethan smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead, slow and soft, like her words were wrapping you in a blanket. Will Aurora be okay? She asked. Ethan hesitated. I don't know, but she's not alone anymore. Lily nodded. She reminds me of Mommy. How so she looks strong even when she's not. Ethan's heart squeezed. Yeah, she does. Lily yawned. Can we visit her again tomorrow? Ethan looked out the window where the city blinked like a tired giant. Yes, he said quietly. We'll keep reminding her she's not lost. Meanwhile, in room 802, the harmonica had fallen off the bedside table. No one saw it. No one heard it. But Aurora's hand, without warning, reached slowly over the edge of the bed and picked it up. By Thursday morning, Aurora Westwood was trending again. Not for a lawsuit, not for a product launch or a corporate power play. This time, it was because she moved her hand. An offhand remark from an intern to a reporter had spiraled into headlines. Miracle recovery. Westlight. CEO reacts to stimuli Silicon Valley. Sleeping Beauty wakes outside St. Alden's Medical Center. Cameras multiplied. Reporters camped on benches ready to pounce. The hospital PR team went into overdrive. But inside room 802, none of that mattered. Aurora, still in a coma, held a harmonica in one hand and an old baseball in the other. Dr. Manning stood stiffly near the monitors. His fingers tapped a pen against his clipboard. The rhythmic tick, 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 betraying the unease he didn't show on his face. Across the room, Nancy adjusted Aurora's IV with slow, deliberate care. I know what the readings say, he muttered, but we're not out of the woods. Not by a long shot. No one said we were, Nancy replied without looking up. He hesitated. I don't like these anomalies. Emotional objects shouldn't be overriding neural diagnostics. Nancy turned, eyebrow raised. And yet here she is, holding two emotional objects and stabilizing by the hour. Dr. Manning sighed, reluctant, but honest. I can't explain it. Nancy softened. Then maybe stop trying. Just observe. Downstairs, Ethan leaned against the vending machine. Arms crossed, a slight furrow between his brows. He wasn't a man prone to nerves. War had taken that from him. But this was different. He was starting to believe in things he'd buried, like timing, like connection, like the possibility that someone lost might not be lost forever. "Dad," a familiar voice called. "Lily." Breathless. She moved her hand again. Right, Ethan looked down at his daughter, the small compass by which he now navigated life. He nodded. "Yeah, and the press knows." Lily wrinkled her nose. "They're gonna ruin it, aren't they?" Ethan chuckled. "Let's just keep doing what we do." Later that evening, Ethan returned to room 802 with another box tucked under his arm. Nancy met him at the door. "You bring another artifact from the Temple of Lost Things." "Something like that," he replied. He placed the box on the table beside Aurora. Inside was a plastic snow globe. Inside the dome, a tiny red brick building stood surrounded by fake snow, a replica of Maple Hollow Elementary, the school both he and Aurora had once attended. "I stole this from a book, fair," Ethan said softly. "She made me return it. Told me no one who steals can remember who they are for long." He gave the globe a gentle shake. The snow fell like quiet memories. Aurora's breathing hitched. Nancy looked up sharply. The harmonica slipped from Aurora's hand and landed in her lap. Her fingers twitched, then tightened. The snow globe began to glow. Not literally, but in that moment, it felt alive. Ethan and Nancy both leaned forward, breath held. Then Aurora's eyelids fluttered, just once. But this time, they didn't fall shut again. Her eyes opened, unfocused, confused. Nancy grabbed her wrist, checking her pulse. "Aurora, can you hear me?" The CEO blinked slowly. Her lips parted. And then, in a voice that was more breath than sound, she whispered thin. He stepped closer, stunned. "I'm here." She looked straight at him. The recognition wasn't full. It was foggy faint, like someone staring through frosted glass. But it was there. "You were there," she murmured with the swing set and the ball. Ethan's chest tightened. "Yeah, you gave it to me. I told you. To remember." "You did," he said softly. "And now I'm here to remind you." Tears welled in her eyes, but no panic, no fear. Just the quiet, aching echo of something lost, finally turning home. Nancy, quietly wiping her eyes, whispered, "I'll give you two a moment." Outside room 802, the hallway began to buzz. Someone had noticed the machines, the facial movement, the open eyes. Within minutes, executives, lawyers, security, and PR staff converged like a tide. But inside the room, Ethan ignored the rising storm. He reached out gently, took Aurora's hand, and just held it. Nothing flashy, no speeches, just presence. She stared at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. I forgot everything she said. Ethan shook his head. Not everything. That night, while the world speculated and headlines swirled, Aurora Westwood slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. In her dreams, she saw a swing set, a baseball, a girl with scraped knees, and a boy with sad eyes who needed to win at something. And she remembered. Aurora woke to sunlight and silence, a rare combination in Manhattan. For a long moment, she simply lay still, not because she was in pain, but because the world felt too large. Her limbs were heavy, but no longer foreign. The oxygen tube tickled her nose. Machines beeped softly in the background. But it wasn't the equipment she noticed first. It was the baseball nestled gently in her palm, and the sound of a harmonica, faint, almost imagined. She turned her head slightly and saw it resting on the table beside a children's drawing of a hospital room. A girl, a man, a son with a smiling face. The memories didn't come in clear pictures. They came like smells, like the feeling of grass on bare legs, like laughter on a summer afternoon. Something inside her, something long, buried beneath board meetings and stock prices, began to stir. Nancy stepped into the room quietly. She smiled when she saw Aurora blinking against the light. "You're awake," she said, gently, approaching the bed. Aurora tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Nancy poured water into a cup with a bendy straw and held it to her lips. "Small sips," she advised. "You've been out for almost 2 weeks." Aurora took the water, then pointed weakly at the baseball. "Where did that come from?" Nancy smiled. "A friend." "A friend," Nancy nodded. "The kind who remembers who you were before the world told you who to be." Aurora let that sit in the air. It felt right and deeply unfamiliar. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Tests were run. Specialists whispered terms she didn't understand. But through it all, Aurora stayed silent. Not out of fear, not confusion, but something else. She was listening not to the words, but to herself. For the first time in years, she kept the baseball close, and when no one was watching, she gently spun the snow globe with the little red school building inside and watched the flakes fall. Later that day, Nancy returned with a small box in hand. "It's not protocol," she said, "but he asked if I could give you this." Aurora blinked. Nancy handed over the box. Inside was a faded photo. 2 children, a boy and a girl, sitting on a stoop, each holding a juice box and a popsicle stick. The girl had wild curls. The boy's knees were scraped. They were smiling like the world hadn't happened yet. Aurora stared at it for a long time. Then her lips parted. Ethan. Downstairs, Ethan pushed his mop quietly along the hallway floor. He didn't look up when the hospital director walked past, flanked by board members in dark suits and tense expressions. He'd heard the whispers. Aurora had spoken his name. It was both a miracle and a threat. The hospital didn't know what to do with janitors who saved CEOs. That night, Ethan sat on the roof garden. Again, Lily beside him, legs swinging over the edge. "She's really awake?" Lily asked, hopeful. "She is," Ethan said. "She even said my name." Lily grinned. "Told you my drawing worked." He smiled. "You're a miracle worker." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Will she remember everything now Ethan was quiet? Maybe not everything, but the important stuff. That might find its way back. Lily picked at her shoelaces. "What if she doesn't remember you the way you remember her?" Ethan chuckled a dry, wistful sound. "Then I'll just remind her. Gently. Like you do with someone who's been asleep for a long time." The next morning, the door to room 802 opened quietly. Aurora turned her head as Ethan entered, dressed in his usual faded work uniform, mop bucket trailing behind him like a loyal dog. She studied him for a moment. "You kept it," she said, eyes flicking to the baseball. Ethan paused. "I did." She reached for it and smiled faintly. "I remember giving it to you, but I don't remember everything." "That's okay," he said, setting the mop aside. He pulled a chair up and sat beside her. "I remember the smell of cut grass," she whispered, "and laughter, and someone who looked like you but younger. Sad eyes." "That was me," he said, "before I knew I could matter to anyone." Aurora looked at him, then really looked. No titles, no names. Just 2 people sharing air in a quiet moment that felt bigger than both of them. "Why are you here?" she asked. Ethan thought about that. He could have said it was chance, or duty, or kindness. But instead he said the truth. "Because you saved me once," he said. "And I've been trying to give that back ever since." Aurora blinked, moisture forming in her eyes. "I was just a kid," she said. "Doesn't matter," Ethan replied. "You saw me when no one else did. That kind of seeing, it sticks." They sat there in the stillness, no machines interrupting, no doctors, probing just presence. And for the first time since waking, Aurora felt safe. Outside, the reporters were still waiting. Inside, the real story had already begun. It rained the next morning. Not the heavy, angry kind, just a slow, whispering drizzle that painted the windows of room 802 in soft gray streaks. the kind of rain that makes a city pause, if only for a moment. Aurora watched it silently from her hospital bed. She was sitting up now, barely with pillows behind her back, but upright nonetheless. Her hands rested on the blanket, the baseball still tucked gently in her palm. She didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. She turned it over again and again, letting her thumb trace the faded red stitching. The smiley face was almost gone, but the words scratched in shaky handwriting remained. To the bravest boy in the world, never forget who you are. She didn't remember writing it, but she remembered the feeling that lived inside those words, the need to remind someone they mattered. Now, strangely, it was reminding her. Ethan hadn't visited since yesterday. She noticed that. Not in a needy way. More like the missing sound in a song she didn't realize she'd memorized. The nurses came and went. So did the specialists. One even brought a neurologist from Switzerland, who asked her to blink in strange patterns. But Ethan had stayed away. Aurora asked Nancy about it after lunch. "He's probably giving you space," Nancy said, fluffing the pillows behind her. "That man's been dancing around you like a fire he doesn't want to burn." Aurora gave a dry smile. "He's not exactly easy to ignore." "No," Nancy chuckled. "Neither are you. That's why you two are a problem waiting to happen." Aurora looked down. "I'm not who I used to be." Nancy paused. "Is that a bad thing? I don't know," Aurora admitted. "The world expects me to pick up where I left off. But I don't want to go back to that version of me. She was polished, sure, but exhausted. Always performing. Always pretending she wasn't lonely." Nancy didn't offer sympathy, just clarity. "You died in one life, Aurora," she said gently but firmly. "Maybe you get to choose how you live the next one." Later that afternoon, Aurora found herself alone. Rain tapped gently against the glass. The hospital was unusually quiet. And then, a soft knock at the door. It opened just slightly, and Lily's head peeked in her ponytail, crooked, her eyes bright. "Hi," she said shyly. "Is it okay if I come?" In Aurora's face lit up in a way it hadn't for anyone else. "Of course." Lily entered, holding a small paper bag. "I brought you something." She climbed up into the visitor's chair and carefully pulled out a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, cut diagonally and wrapped in wax paper. "My dad says hospital food is sad. I figured you needed real food." Aurora laughed, truly laughed for the first time since waking. Lily smiled wide. "That's better." They talked for a while, about books, about Lily's school, about how loud nurses snore on the night shift, and somewhere in the middle of the story, about a frog in the lunchroom, Ethan appeared at the doorway. He froze, surprised to see Lily already there. Aurora looked up, eyes softening. "You're late." He gave her a crooked smile. "I didn't realize you had company. She's better than all the doctors," Aurora said. "And more honest." Lily beamed proudly. "I told her the harmonica wasn't really magical, just old." Ethan laughed. "She's right. It only works if you breathe like you mean it." Aurora looked at him, really looked. The man who once sat on her stoop as a boy with dirt on his knees. The man who had disappeared into shadows and now quietly saved her life without asking for a thing in return. "You kept everything," she whispered. Ethan stepped forward slowly. "I wasn't sure why. I just couldn't let it go." Their eyes met. Something shifted. A silence fell over the room, not uncomfortable but charged. Lily, sensing something too grown up for her to interrupt, slid off the chair and handed Aurora the sandwich. "I'm gonna go draw something," she said sweetly, then tiptoed out with her backpack bouncing behind her. Ethan remained awkward now. Aurora looked down at her lap. "I owe you more than I can say." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "You gave me a reason to breathe when I had none. I just returned the favor." She blinked hard. Her voice grew soft. I don't remember everything, Ethan. But I remember you. Not clearly, but how you made me feel safe. Like I wasn't just noise in the world. His eyes glistened. That's how you made me feel too, even as a kid. She reached for his hand. He hesitated for only a moment, then took it, letting their fingers intertwine. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was recognition of a shared wound, a shared memory, a shared silence that once held both of them hostage, now replaced with something new. Her chin quivered. I thought I had everything, she whispered, but I didn't have this. And then quietly, a single tear rolled down her cheek. Not out of pain, not even sadness, but the overwhelming, tender grief of a soul waking up. Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it once reverently. You're home, he said. Even if you don't know the address yet. Outside, the rain began to lift. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the sky let through a little sunlight. Aurora's discharge was handled like a quiet evacuation. The hospital board insisted on a press release. Her publicist wanted exclusive interviews lined up. The shareholders demanded proof of her full mental capacity before letting her near a boardroom again. But Aurora, she wanted none of it. Nancy stood beside her as the nurse gently unhooked the final IV line. You sure about this? Nancy asked. Aurora looked out the window. The city pulsed below alive, demanding, impatient. I've never been more sure of anything, she said softly. I don't want to wake up in the same life I collapsed in. Nancy nodded. Then don't. Wake up somewhere else. Ethan was waiting by the elevator, one hand resting on Lily's shoulder. He wore a clean button-up, not fancy, just intentional. He hadn't cut his hair. He hadn't changed who he was. But something about him looked lighter, like a man stepping out from under a long shadow. Aurora stepped into the hallway, slowly using a cane more for balance than need. Her gait was cautious, but her expression was calm. Lily beamed when she saw her. You're standing, barely, Aurora said with a grin. But I'll take it. Nancy rolled her eyes. She's stronger than half the interns here. Ethan smiled. She always was. Aurora looked up at him, eyes locking. Let's go, she said. He nodded. And just like that, without headlines, without bodyguards, without photographers, the CEO left the tower. They didn't go to the penthouse. Aurora didn't even ask to swing by her office. Her phone, laptop, and 3 personal assistants were still waiting for instructions. None came. Instead, she asked Ethan a single question in the elevator. Can you take me somewhere quiet? And he did. The apartment over the laundromat was small but sun-drenched, with mismatched furniture and a warm smell of cinnamon and something fried. Aurora took in the modest space, like someone stepping into a childhood photograph. I'm sorry for the mess, Ethan said, tossing a few books into a corner. Lily's been building a blanket fort in the living room for 3 weeks. Aurora smiled. I used to do that too. She says it's her creative lab. I'm not allowed inside. Lily popped her head out from behind a wall of pillows. Don't touch the blue blanket, that's the roof. Aurora laughed genuinely, the sound bouncing off the exposed brick walls like a piano chord. She turned back to Ethan. This place feels real. He studied her face. Do you want tea or something stronger? She raised an eyebrow. Do you have bourbon? Ethan chuckled. Only the cheap kind. I'll take it. They sat on the balcony later, sipping from mismatched mugs. For a while, neither of them spoke. The air was cool, and from somewhere down the street came the sound of kids playing basketball. Aurora watched the sky shift from gold to blue-gray, eyes soft. I don't remember the merger that made me a billionaire, she said quietly. I don't remember the TED Talk, the 3 magazine covers, or the speech at Stanford. Ethan leaned back. Do you want to? He thought about it. Not really. I remember a tree swing behind a red brick school. I remember a boy who didn't talk much, but always shared his sandwich. I remember kindness. And laughter. She paused. And I think, I want to remember the rest from here. Not from a resume. Ethan turned to her. Then stay. As long as you need. Aurora looked at him. I'm not the woman the world thinks I am, she said. I'm still figuring out who that is. He nodded. Then let the world wait. That evening, Ethan gave her the spare bedroom. It smelled faintly of laundry detergent and sunshine. Aurora sat on the edge of the bed and ran her fingers along the handmade quilt. There was no voice assistant, no city skyline, no noise, just stillness. She looked in the mirror for a long time, not to check her face, not to critique her hair, but to meet the woman she'd almost never become. The next morning she woke up to the smell of pancakes and Lily humming a Taylor Swift song. Aurora stepped into the kitchen slowly, her cane tucked under one arm. You cook? She asked Ethan. He shrugged. It's edible. Lily's the real chef. Lily beamed. I make the shapes. Today you're getting a heart. Aurora sat down and smiled. Perfect. The pancakes weren't fancy. No microgreens, no imported syrups. Just warm batter, real butter, and enough sweetness to make her feel something like joy. It was the best breakfast she'd had in a decade. Later that day, a black SUV pulled up outside the building. Two men in suits stepped out. One carried a briefcase. The other held a tablet. They knocked. Ethan opened the door halfway. Can I help you? We're here for Ms. Westwood, the taller one said. The board needs her signature on a transition agreement, temporary power of attorney, until she's ready to resume duties. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. Aurora stood behind him in jeans and a hoodie hair pulled back barefoot, holding Lily's drawing from the hospital. She looked the men dead in the eye and said, Tell the board I'll call when I'm ready. They shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, legally, I'm not making decisions today, she said gently. I'm remembering how to live. And with that, she closed the door. Ethan looked at her. Are you sure? Aurora nodded. They had my brain, but they never got my heart. Autumn arrived in slow breaths. Leaves along the sidewalk curled into golden fists. The city's roar dimmed just slightly, like even Manhattan knew when to soften. And in a small apartment above a laundromat, Aurora Westwood was learning how to be ordinary and loving it. It wasn't just about the slower mornings or the creaky floorboards that told you where everyone was. It was the rhythm. The gentle human rhythm of living in a home that wasn't spotless, but was full of life. Aurora had traded high heels for socks with cartoon dogs, conference calls for pancake breakfasts, and power for presents. She hadn't checked her work phone in 12 days. She hadn't missed it once. Most mornings began the same. Ethan brewed coffee. Lily argued with her shoelaces. Aurora would emerge sleepy-eyed from the spare room, hair tied up with a pencil, a book in one hand, and yesterday's sweater in the other. They never said it aloud, but it had become a family rhythm. The kind of life you don't notice you're building, until someone smiles and says, You look happy. And Aurora did look happy in a quiet, real way, the kind that doesn't need proving. That Friday morning, Ethan found her sitting on the stoop with a bowl of cereal watching pigeons, like they were ballet dancers. You're up early, he said. She gestured to the sunrise. Didn't want to miss this. He sat beside her, still holding a dish rag in one hand. Are you avoiding the inbox again? He teased. She grinned. I archived the entire thing. If it was important, they'll call. He gave a low whistle. You just broke 10 corporate bylaws. Add it to my resume. A pause. Then her voice grew softer. Ethan, do you think it's selfish to want this life? He turned to her. You mean normal? I mean, real? Slow? Close enough to hear someone laugh from the next room. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared out at the street, then back at her. "No," he said. "It's not selfish. It's brave." She looked down at her cereal, stirred it. "I've spent so many years trying to impress people I wouldn't cry for if they died." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And now I'd cry if Lily got a splinter." He smiled. "That's the woman I want to be," she whispered. "You already are." Later that day, Aurora wandered into the kitchen apron tied crookedly around her waist. She had decided she was going to cook dinner, a real one from scratch. Ethan stood nearby watching with amusement as she diced an onion like it was a science experiment. "You're holding the knife like you're negotiating a merger," he said. "Well, mergers don't cry back," she sniffled, eyes watering. He stepped behind her, guiding her hands gently. "Like this. Curl your fingers inward. The blade should glide." His breath was close, his touch gentle. Aurora didn't move. Her heart fluttered in a way that had nothing to do with onions. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were. But before anything more could happen, Lily burst into the room, waving a school flyer like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Dad, Miss Karen says I can bring someone to Family Day next Friday. Can I bring both of you?" Ethan blinked. Both Lily nodded with conviction. "You're my dad, and Aurora is my almost mom." Aurora froze. Ethan looked at her, not panicked, not embarrassed, just open. She knelt down to Lily's level. "Are you sure you want me there?" Lily threw her arms around her. "I want you in every story I tell." Aurora held her tightly, blinking back tears. "I'll be there," she whispered. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan and Aurora stood out on the fire escape sipping tea. "I didn't expect her to say that," Aurora admitted. "She sees the truth before we do," Ethan said. Aurora nodded slowly. "You know, I used to think the only thing I was good at was building companies, making money, making people believe I had all the answers. And now," she looked at him, "now I think the best thing I've ever done is show up here." He didn't speak, just stared at her, like he was trying to memorize this exact version of her. "Ethan," she whispered, "what if I stay tonight?" She shook her head. "Stay. For good." The question hung in the air like a wish made at midnight. Ethan's voice was low, almost afraid to break the moment. "You'd trade the world for this." Aurora looked up at him, her voice steady. "No," she said. "I'd trade the world to keep this." And for the first time he kissed her, not with urgency, not with passion, but with recognition of everything they had lost and everything they had finally found. Family Day at Eastwood Elementary smelled like construction paper glue sticks and cafeteria spaghetti. The gymnasium was filled with folding chairs, string lights, and a stage that creaked under the weight of childhood dreams. Parents stood in small huddles holding coffee in styrofoam cups, their eyes half watching the chaos of streamers and glitter. And in the middle of it all, Lily Callahan twirled in a flower-patterned dress, waving at her father and Aurora like they were the only two people in the world. "Third row center," she shouted, pointing to two seats she'd taped their names to in crooked handwriting. Aurora looked at Ethan with a soft smile. "She's organized. That's dangerous." "She gets it from her mother," Ethan said quietly. Aurora's smile faltered for just a second. "I wish I'd known her," she said gently. Ethan looked at her, not with sorrow, but peace. "She'd have liked you." Claire wasn't afraid of strong women. Aurora sat down, adjusting the hem of her jacket. "That makes two of us." The lights dimmed. A teacher with too much enthusiasm introduced the class. Then came the performances, one after another, small voices belting out songs, poems, and skits. When it was Lily's turn, she walked to center stage, holding a piece of yellow construction paper folded in half. She took a deep breath and began, This is a story about a girl, her dad, and the woman who gave them back their smiles. Aurora blinked, stunned. Once the girl's daddy was very sad, and the world felt too big. But then they met someone who remembered how to laugh, even when she forgot everything else. People chuckled gently. She didn't know she was magic, but she was. Because she didn't try to fix everything. She just stayed. And we got better. Lily paused, scanning the crowd eyes resting on Aurora. So this is my story. It's not finished yet. But I hope it ends with all three of us, in the same home. Silence. Then applause. Not polite, not casual. Real. Aurora didn't clap. She couldn't. Her hands were trembling. Her eyes stung. Ethan placed his hand over hers and squeezed once firm and warm. No words. Just that. And somehow it said everything. That evening back at the apartment, Aurora tucked Lily into bed while Ethan cleaned the dishes. When Aurora returned to the kitchen, she was quiet. Thoughtful. She wrote that on her own, she asked. Ethan nodded, drying a plate. Didn't show it to me until this morning. Aurora leaned against the doorway. That's not just a kid's poem. No, he said. It's not. She crossed the room and took the dish towel from his hand. Can I ask you something, she said. Anything. If I stayed here, really stayed, would that be enough for you? Ethan looked at her like she'd just asked him if water was still wet. Aurora, he said, I didn't fall in love with your last name. She inhaled sharply, chest rising. Say that again, she whispered. I didn't fall in love with your last name. He stepped closer. I fell for the girl who gave a broken boy a baseball, for the woman who woke up and chose to live differently, for the person who let my daughter draw her back to life. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. I fell in love, he said. With you. Aurora reached up, cupped his cheek. Even if I never go back to being who I was, especially if you don't. And this time, when he kissed her, it wasn't recognition. It was a beginning. The next morning, Aurora rose before the sun. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a legal pad. Not a tablet. Not a phone. Just pen and paper, something that made her feel real. She wrote a letter to her board of directors. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg for space. She simply said, I will not be returning to my previous role. I have remembered something far more valuable than valuation. I remembered how to love, and how to be loved without condition. Thank you for everything. But I've found what I was missing. She signed it. Aurora Quinn, using her mother's maiden name for the first time in decades. She left the pen beside the page and looked out the window. The city blinked in the distance, but she didn't feel pulled toward it anymore. Behind her, Lily's footsteps padded softly into the kitchen. She climbed into Aurora's lap like she'd done it 100 times. Are we having pancakes? Aurora smiled. Yes, and then, maybe we plant some flowers on the balcony. Lily nodded. Can we get the purple ones? Ethan entered the room, rubbing his eyes. You two planning a garden? Now? Maybe a little one, Aurora said. Something that starts small and grows. Ethan leaned down and kissed the top of her head. I think that's exactly what we are. 1 year later, the world barely remembered that Aurora Westwood once ran a billion-dollar company, and that was exactly how she wanted it. No press tours, no LinkedIn posts, no return to quarterly earnings, calls, or red carpet galas. The name Westwood still appeared on office towers and tech articles, but Aurora Quinn, the woman who now walked the earth in quiet, worn boots, had become something else entirely. She was known now only to the people who mattered, and that was more than enough. On a sunny afternoon in early October, Aurora stood in the backyard of a modest farmhouse 2 hours north of the city. Her sleeves rolled her fingers. muddy her eyes full of laughter. Ethan stood nearby, setting up a handmade wooden bench beneath a tree that leaned just enough to cast the perfect kind of shade. Lily danced barefoot through the grass, chasing a butterfly like it owed her a story. Aurora paused, wiping sweat from her brow, and looked out across the land they now called home. It had once belonged to Ethan's grandfather, a crumbling barn, wild blueberry bushes, and a porch with a roof that moaned in heavy wind. Over the past months, they'd fixed what they could and learned to live with what they couldn't. There was no staff, no driver, no calendar alerts, just sunlight, wind, and each other. And in the softest hours of the day, quiet joy. Inside the house, a wooden shelf near the front door held 5 small items. 1, a faded baseball. 2, a harmonica. 3, a snow globe of Maple Hollow Elementary. 4, Lily's first drawing of their family. 5, and most recently, a framed photo Ethan, Lily, and Aurora beneath the backyard tree, faces sunlit eyes shining. It wasn't the kind of photo that would make a magazine cover, but it was the kind that built legacies. That evening, as the sun folded into gold behind the hills, Ethan and Aurora sat together on the porch swing, Lily curled up between them, already half asleep. The wind stirred gently, lifting the hem of Aurora's dress, carrying the scent of rosemary from the garden. I was thinking Ethan said softly about the day we met. The real first day. Aurora smiled. You mean when I gave you the baseball? No, he said. That was your beginning. Mine came later, the day you looked at me like I wasn't invisible. Aurora leaned her head on his shoulder. You never were. Not to me. They sat in silence for a long time. The kind of silence you earn. Then Lily stirred, mumbling, Tell me a story. What kind of story? Ethan asked. One where someone gets found? She murmured, not opening her eyes. But they didn't know they were lost. Aurora's throat tightened. Ethan looked at her, smiled faintly. You want to do the honors? Aurora thought for a moment. Then she began. Once there was a girl who thought she had to be strong all the time. She built tall buildings and big dreams and wore heels that clicked like power. But one day, her mind went quiet. Her body said, stop. And no one could reach her. She glanced at Ethan. He nodded her forward. Until someone came. Not with medicine, not with answers, but with something simpler. A memory. A baseball. A harmonica. A little girl with drawings. And a man who still believed in quiet things, like kindness and pancakes and morning sunlight. And little by little, she remembered not who she had been, but who she still was. Lily, now fully asleep, smiled in her dreams. Aurora looked out at the twilight. The end. Ethan took her hand, kissed her knuckles. Not the end, he said. Just the good part. A week later, a padded envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a book, hardcover cream-colored, titled The Gift of Remembering. On the dedication page it read, For Ethan, who held on to what I forgot and gave it back without ever asking why. For Lily, whose heart reminded mine how to beat again. And for anyone who thinks they're lost, may you find someone who stays until you return. The book quietly climbed the bestseller list. But Aurora didn't care. She never checked the numbers. She was too busy planting tulips with Lily and writing the next one. In a world obsessed with the next big thing, she had chosen something small. A love that needed no memory. A life that needed no audience. A story that needed no headline. And in doing so, she'd found something most people spend a lifetime chasing: peace. If you've made it this far, thank you. Truly. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Whether you're sipping coffee in a quiet town, riding the night shift, or relaxing with family, please share your city or country in the comments. It warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel. And if this story moved you in any way, we invite you to subscribe to our channel for more tales that celebrate the quiet strength of love, kindness, and human connection. From our hearts to yours, thank you for watching. We're so grateful you're here. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the smallest moments leave the deepest marks.